Welcome back. In Activity 4, we're going to be evaluating functions given an output. In last video, we evaluated functions given an input. There's a little bit more work involved in finding the input value when you have the output using this equation. Again, we have three different equations. F of x is equal to 2x plus 5. We have h of x, which is equal to negative 4x plus 2. And last, we have g of x function. Notice that sometimes I use the word function and sometimes I use the word equation. And I interchange those terms sometimes without really realizing when I'm using them. What I really mean to say is the equation and function are kind of the same thing. But function is it's a type of equation. Function is a type of equation where each input has exactly one output. That was the definition of a function that we used. So in this example, we're going to find x, the input, if f of x is equal to 11. So first of all, we're going to use the f of x function, and we're going to look for the input, which is x, when the output, f of x, is equal to 11. So understand that f of x is the output, which is equal to 11. So we're going to replace f of x with 11. So let's do that right now. I'm going to rewrite the function first. So here's my function. F of x is equal to 2x plus 5. And I'm going to replace the f of x with 11. Okay, and I'm going to keep the right side of the equation the same. Now you actually have to understand when to replace what variable. In the previous example, we were given the input, so we were replacing the x with the input. And here we have the output, f of x is equal to 11, so we're replacing f of x with 11. And that's something you're going to have to keep in mind. So again, understand those notation. So here we have basically a two-step equation. We're going to solve this equation to figure out the x value, which is the input. So let's subtract 5 from both sides. So 11 minus 5 is equal to 6. And we can divide both sides by 2 to figure out that x is going to be equal to 3. So we know that x is equal to 3. And we're going to write this using the function notation, which is basically f, the input is 3, so f of 3 is equal to the output, which we were given 11. I want to focus on a couple things here. You have to understand that the notation is really the key to understanding how to evaluate functions. Oops, that doesn't look good. But if you have f of 3, where 3 is inside the parentheses, how is that different from f of x, where x is in the parentheses and equal to a number, let's say 11? Okay. Maybe you could take notes on this, but let's try to understand this. In this example, is it the y equal to 3 or is it the x that is equal to 3? That's basically what you have to figure out. The answer is, well, remember, input goes inside the parentheses. So in this case, the x value is equal to 3. Okay. And in this case, whatever the y value is, that's going to be equal to 11. Again, we weren't really using y in our functions, but then you could say, well, f of x is like kind of like the y. Okay. Or here, the h of x is kind of like the y. So that's something You just have to understand the difference between when to evaluate for input and when to evaluate for a given output. Alright, let's go back to another example. Let's do example B. We're asked to find x, the input, if h of x, the output, is equal to negative 30. So we're going to replace h of x with negative 30. So let's start with this equation over here. My function I'm looking for x when the output is negative 30. So I replaced h of x with negative 30. Let's solve this two-step equation. I'm going to separate the two sides. That's a negative 4. Okay. 4 goes to 32 how many times? The answer is 8. So negative divided by negative is going to be a positive 8. And that's what our x is. There you go. We figured out the input. So writing this as a function notation, again, the input goes inside the parentheses. F of 8, I'm going to fix that 8, is equal to negative 30. This is something you will have to get used to writing it. So when x is equal to 8, the y value is negative 30. In this case, f of 8 is equal to negative 30. Okay. Now have you try example C, D, E, and F on your own. I will give you the answer to example C using the g function, and then you'll have to do the rest on your own. So here's my g of x function, which is equal to 8x minus 45. I'm going to replace g of x, the left side of the equation, with negative 13. We found out that x is equal to 4, so our input value is 4. I'm going to write that as a function notation. So f of 4 is equal to negative 13. This is how you evaluate functions. I hope this video was helpful, and keep in mind there's tons of other resources that you can use. Khan Academy is one resource that I always refer to. But here's the video on equation versus function. I can post this on our Google Classroom. Alright, until then, have a good day. And here's something to look at while you're doing your classwork.